Think back to the last time you were at the supermarket, staring at the price of a pound of fish. That number on the label didn't just go up, it skyrocketed. Meanwhile, somewhere else on this planet, someone is pulling fresh protein out of a hole in their garden without spending a dime. That person doesn't have a degree in marine biology or a high-tech greenhouse. They have mud, rainwater, and a body of knowledge that has been working since before zip codes existed. You, on the other hand, are stuck in a checkout line with a half-empty cart and a bank account that is hemorrhaging a little more every single week. It is not that you don't know how to grow food. It is not a lack of will. It is that you were born into a circuit designed to keep you completely dependent. Every link in the supply chain that brings food to your table takes its cut. And when a single one of those links snaps, you don't eat. It is that simple. It is that brutal. Now, go back with me a few thousand years. We are in the Yellow River Valley in China. Long before anyone invented plastic or synthetic fertilizers, the seasonal floods recede, leaving puddles in the lowlands. Inside those puddles, trapped carp remain alive, reproducing and fattening up. The farmers of that time didn't have laboratories. They had eyes. They observed. They dug a little deeper. They reinforced the edges with clay. And suddenly, they had protein available whenever they needed it. That simple gesture, enlarging a puddle and letting nature do the work, fed entire civilizations for millennia. By the time of the Shang Dynasty, over 3,500 years ago, references to fish ponds integrated into agricultural plots were already appearing on oracle bones. Peasants raised common carp in work ponds. The wealthy kept them golden in decorative ones. Then, a political accident changed everything. During the Tang Dynasty, the emperor's surname happened to sound exactly like the name for the common carp. Whether by superstition or decree, raising that species was banned across the empire. Imagine that, your primary source of protein for over 1,000 years, cancelled overnight by the whim of a ruler. But the farmers didn't give up. They put multiple species into the same pond. One carp fed on bottom sediment, another filtered algae at mid-depth, another devoured surface plants, and one more consumed the remaining plankton. Each fish occupied its own floor in that aquatic building. Zero competition, zero waste, a stacked ecosystem that regulated itself and produced more than any previous method. By the time the first European travelers arrived to document what they saw in the 11th century, village ponds were so common they were described as part of the natural landscape, just like trees or roads. A fish farmer named Fan Li had written the manual centuries earlier, the Yang Yu Jing, a treatise explaining how a single installation could generate more protein per square foot than livestock, and more nutrition per acre than any modern industrial farm. Once built, this system fed families for decades, without buying feed and without depending on anyone. This knowledge survived wars, dynasties, and the collapse of empires, because it was too valuable to disappear. And yet today, most people in the West have never even heard of backyard pond aquaculture, a system that has fed more humans throughout history than almost any other protein source remains invisible. That silence isn't an oversight. Someone decided you didn't need to know this, that it was better for you to remain dependent on the supermarket, the truck, and the price someone else sets for you. The question is, how much longer are you going to accept that deal? That deal has a name that no one says out loud, because what they sold you as agricultural progress, that bag of synthetic fertilizer, that herbicide promising a clean field, that bagged black soil smelling of industrial chemicals, wasn't designed to feed you. It was designed to keep you buying. Imagine a researcher in Auburn, Alabama in the mid-1960s. He is standing in front of a 90-square-meter pond, barely the size of a modest swimming pool. He has stocked it with channel catfish and sunfish, following techniques a Chinese fish farmer described 1,500 years ago. He adds no commercial feed, he pours in no chemicals, he just observes. By the end of the season, that rectangle of water yields 160 kilograms of clean protein. Next to it, a quarter-acre of conventional pasture, with its fence, its vet, its bags of feed, and its monthly bills, produces 90 kilograms of beef. less than half the yield, in 10 times the space, at a cost that never stops climbing. The numbers were there, published, peer-reviewed, undeniable. And yet no agricultural college taught it on a large scale. No rural extension office included it in their programs. No government subsidy funded its replication. It wasn't an oversight, it was a decision. The industrial meat system in the US is a $200 billion a year industry. Every productive pond that pops up in a backyard is one less customer. Every family that discovers that the nitrogen from the waste of 3 ducks feeds the algae, which feeds the zooplankton, which feeds the small fish, which feed the large ones, is a family that stops going through the checkout line. So, the knowledge was buried under layers of green marketing. They told you that you needed NPK fertilizer for anything to grow. What they didn't tell you is that every application of synthetic nitrogen wipes out the mycorrhizal network beneath your feet. Those invisible fungal threads that for millions of years have transported nutrients, communicated pest alerts between plants, and maintained soil structure without costing a cent. One pass of broad-spectrum herbicide doesn't just kill the weeds you see. It sterilizes the living layer you don't. And when that layer dies, the soil compacts, loses its ability to hold water, and suddenly you need irrigation. When it loses its microorganisms, you need more fertilizer. When it loses its biological defense, you need fungicide. Every product you buy creates the need for the next. It is not agriculture, it is a monthly subscription disguised as science. The European settlers who came to America brought cows, pigs, and chickens. Animals that demand constant feeding, permanent fencing, and daily labor. They looked at self-managed edible ponds and dismissed them as primitive. But they weren't primitive, they were biological engineering so elegant. It functioned for entire dynasties without interruption, and produced thousands of pounds of protein a year, without a single bag of feed. What was primitive was replacing that with a model that requires constant chemical injections just to keep from collapsing. This is where the story gets personal, because that dead soil the agribusiness depends on is the same soil beneath your lawn. Every time you bought bagged soil for a pot, you paid for an inert substrate that needs fertilizer to mimic what a healthy ecosystem does for free. Every time you leased your nutrition to the supermarket, you funded the same cycle that destroyed the alternative. But biology cannot be erased by a marketing campaign. The same principles Fan Lai documented, the same ones Auburn verified with hard data, still work today in any backyard with access to water and sunlight. The question isn't whether the system works. The question is, who doesn't want you to know it? And why are you still buying what your own land could produce? If you've ever poured fertilizer into a pot and watched the plant thrive only to die 2 months later, tell me in the comments. Because there is more science behind that story than you realize. Imagine a code that has been running for millions of years, without an update, no patches, no maintenance. An operating system written in bacteria, roots, and scales that executes itself beneath the water of any pond. That is exactly what Fan Lai documented over 1,500 years ago. And what the food industry preferred you forgot. Because a system that feeds itself doesn't generate customers. Let's open that code line by line. You'll see there is nothing mystical about it. It is pure biological engineering visible to the naked eye. Think of a small pond, the size of a bedroom. Now, add ducks not as a hobby, but because every duck walking the edge and diving in is doing 3 jobs you didn't ask for. Their waste fertilizes the water. The fertilized water feeds microscopic plants. Those plants attract insects and larvae that the duck eats the next day. The duck doesn't need you to buy its feed, because the pond is already paying for 30% of its diet in live protein. Meanwhile, a small flock gives you up to 1,700 eggs a year. No one bills you for that cycle. No one sells you an input to make it work. It just happens because that is how it was written in the original code. Look down at the water. Those floating plants aren't decoration. They are the kidneys and lungs of the entire system. The cattails in the shallows do something number $200 mechanical filter can match. Their roots pull excess nitrogen and phosphorus molecule by molecule, preventing algae from taking over. Water lilies lower the temperature with their shade. and slow evaporation in the summer. And beneath the surface, submerged plants like hornwort are releasing oxygen during the day, keeping the fish alive without you plugging in a single aerator. But the piece that truly closes the circuit is invisible: bacteria. Entire colonies of microorganisms take the toxic ammonia from fish waste and convert it first into nitrites, then into nitrates, which is exactly what the plants need to grow. That nitrogen cycle is the backbone of everything. Once established, it regulates itself. And the fish, it depends on where you live. Sunfish need nothing from you. Stock them once, and they reproduce for years, reaching harvest size in about 24 months. Channel catfish grow faster, a pound in 18 months. Tilapia are the fastest, a pound in 5 or 6 months. 50 fingerlings in a modest pond can give you 40 to 50 pounds of clean protein in a single season. Each species occupies a different niche, and together they maintain balance without being told how. This isn't theory, it is a system where every organism works for the others and gets paid in kind. The ducks fertilize, the plants filter, the bacteria transform, the fish grow. And the duckweed doubles its mass every 48 hours to feed the ducks again. A closed loop that asks for no electricity, no chemicals, and no permission. The cost to set this up is around $400 to $600. A liner, some fingerlings, a few ducklings, some plants. Compare that to what you'll spend on supermarket protein over the next 10 years. And the equation solves itself. But there is something this code needs to truly work. And it is precisely what they've tried hardest to erase. Stay with me, because what comes next explains how you can activate this, no matter where you live. Tell me in the comments. If you had this pond tomorrow, what would you stock first, fish or plants? 6 months of doing almost nothing. That is the part no one tells you because it sounds too absurd to be true. But there is the trick that dismantles the industrial logic you've been sold since childhood. The moment you stop intervening is exactly the moment the system starts producing. Think about that ancient code. That network of relationships between water, bacteria, plants, and animals. Now imagine you decide to activate it. You don't need a lab or an agronomist. You need a low point on your land. That corner where water naturally pools after a rain. Where the soil is already telling you it wants to be a pond. 10 by 15 feet, 5 feet deep in the center. One weekend with a shovel, or one afternoon with a rented mini excavator. That is all the brute force this system will ever ask of you. But here is what breaks the brain of anyone raised on fertilizers and irrigation timers. You don't fill that hole with technology. You fill it with layers of life, and then you step away. First come the plants at the edges, cattails, lilies, things that root fast and start filtering. At the bottom, you submerge hornwort. On the surface, you let duckweed float, nothing else. Stand still for 2 weeks. 4. If you can resist the urge to tinker. What is happening beneath that murky surface is millions of bacteria colonizing every inch, building the invisible infrastructure that no chemical can replicate. After a month, the ducks arrive, 2, 3, maybe 5. They hit the water and start stirring up the bottom, clouding everything. And your first instinct is to think something went wrong. It didn't. That is the ecosystem waking up, shaking itself off, reorganizing. Another month, and you release the fish, 50 fingerlings per 1,000 gallons. They vanish into the dark bottom. You won't see them for weeks. Anxiety tells you they died, that you need to buy more. That something is missing. Nothing is missing. They are growing in silence, feeding on what the system is already generating without you moving a finger. And here is where the equation becomes almost offensive to anyone who has paid feed or fertilizer bills. For half a year, your only job is to watch. Observe the ducks, check that the duckweed doesn't cover everything, and top off the water during dry spells. No feeding schedules, no chemicals, no intervention. Less effort than maintaining a decorative lawn. That gives you absolutely nothing in return. By the 6th month, you start seeing silver flashes beneath the surface. Your fish are visible now, growing fast because no one stressed them. No one medicated them, and no one broke the balance. That the bacteria and plants built for you. By the end of the year, some are at harvest size. The ducks, which have been laying since month 5, are giving you 60 to 75 eggs a month, more than an average family can consume. Think about that, fresh protein every morning, without having bought a single bag of feed. The second year, the fish reproduce on their own if you leave a base population. The ducks keep laying, the plants keep filtering. By year 3, you aren't managing anything. You are harvesting from a living thing that has integrated into your land, as if it were always there. Because in a way, it was always meant to be. All you did was dig a hole, release life into it, and resist the modern urge to control every variable. That is the ecological lever no one teaches you, because there is nothing to sell you afterward. No monthly subscription, no recurring inputs, no dependency. Just a system that grows stronger every season while you do less. But there is a seasonal trap most guides ignore. And if you live in a climate where water freezes, you need to know this before the first winter. If you're already imagining yourself by that pond, tell me, what would you plant on the edges first, and why? Imagine a random January morning. The TV is spitting out headlines about shortages. Supermarket prices are up again. And your neighbor just came back empty-handed because the meat aisle was bare. Now imagine yourself walking barefoot to your backyard with a cup of coffee. The pond is there, still covered in a thin layer of frost that barely hides the slow movement of the fish below. The ducks are already out of their shelter, a 3-walled shed with straw. That cost you an afternoon of work and $0. There are warm eggs in the straw. You cast a line, wait 2 minutes, and pull out a fat fish that never ate industrial grain, that grew on the insects and algae your own system generated, without you having to intervene. That scene isn't a pastoral fantasy. It is the mechanical result of digging a hole, letting rainwater fill it, and having the patience to let biology do its job. Fanlai documented it 25 centuries ago. It worked through dynasties, wars, famines, and the collapse of empires. And it works today on your land without government approval, without asking anyone for anything. But notice something, no one taught you this in school. No one mentioned it on the news. An entire century of the food industry was dedicated to convincing you that you needed their cold chain, their logistics, their plastic packaging, and their price tag just to eat. They sold you dependency disguised as convenience. Meanwhile, the oldest, most proven protein production system on Earth was buried under marketing and manufactured amnesia. What you built in that backyard isn't a hobby. It is not a cool project for social media. It is a silent declaration that your food doesn't depend on a truck that might not come, a store that might close, or a price that might triple overnight. It is sovereignty. The pond is already waiting. It just needs you to decide to dig it. Now, tell me in the comments and be honest. If the shelves truly went empty tomorrow, how many days would your fridge last before you had to depend on someone else?